Hey, Who fans, and welcome to the Big Blue Box podcast. My name's Gary.
My name's Adam.
And welcome to episode 406.
Yay!
Welcome to another episode, Who fans. It's another week and another Big Blue Box. We hope you're keeping well and safe and that you've all managed to do something Doctor Who related.
Oh, that was... Well, it's close. It sounded close. I can never tell with the delay. Was that close for you?
Not really, mate.
Blimmin' delay, listeners. Whenever we start recording, there's like about 10-20 minutes where it takes a while for Riverside to catch up with us. So there's like this awkward sort of 3-second delay.
Yeah, as always. Yeah. I won pretty comfortably as usual, though.
Oh, I see. Well,
I'm good, mate. I'm good. Yes, so welcome to 406, and we've got a little bit of news coming up. Just one bit, just to go through. A bit of an interesting one. Nothing too in-depth or crazy, but an interesting point of view on season 1 of Doctor Who from the BBC themselves. So we'll see what they've got to say in their annual report. And then we are on to our review of the first Doctor story and the last full live action first Doctor story that we can review, unless any missing episodes magically turn up in the next however many months, is The Chase. So we'll get on to that. And that's a really interesting one, dude. So I'm intrigued to see what you thought of that one.
Yeah, indeed. It feels really strange to like watching it last night, thinking this is the last story that's complete that we're going to review. Like you said, unless something turns up. So everything else from now on will be, incomplete stories, but ones that have been completed. In other words, like where they filled in sort of episodes with telesnaps or animations or whatever. So yeah, we're sort of going into the... I don't know, I wouldn't call it scraping the barrel because that sounds a bit cruel to some of the stories, but we're sort of going into the bits and bobs now. But it's crazy to think that we've reviewed pretty much everything. Well, after today, we will have reviewed everything that exists in its complete form,
That's crazy. Yeah.
What story, if they were to find, excuse me, a missing episode tomorrow, which one would you like to see come back? And you can't say Space Pirates because everybody wants that. But which one? Which one would you go for out of all the missing ones?
I would probably say either the Highlanders.
Yes.
Just because I feel like it would be such a great Jamie story. And the Doctor and Jamie, they're so good together, Troughton and so I think that'd be cool. Just to have a really good Jamie-focused story. But I'd also like to see the Mythmakers be found, just because nobody ever says that one. And I feel like that would have a bit of a, I don't know, just a... We had it in this week's... you'll hear our thoughts on The Chase in a moment. But there was a period of Doctor Who in the Hartnell era where they really tried to... just make something very fantastical out of very little money. And although they tried to do that with, especially with the Celestial Toymaker as well that we looked at last week, with all that stuff, they, the writers went into this, this mode of like, let's try and do this crazy, animated thing. And this one's a bit more of a, it's kind of like that, but it's also a bit of a historical thing as well, right? So
yeah.
I'd like to see that because I think that would have a good mix of historical stuff and sort of some really cool, sort of fantastical bits thrown in there as well. What about you, dude?
Well, I mean, I know everyone always says Marco Polo, and I do think that would be a great one to get back. But I also worry, has it become, over time, has it been sort of built up to be this great story, and would it be disappointing if it was to turn up? But that would be a good one. But actually, do you know what, mate? You mentioned the Highlanders there, and I recently listened to the audio of that because I was doing a review of the vinyl that's just come out of it. They've just released a special edition vinyl, which is gorgeous, and so I listened to it so I could do a review of it. That is so... I thought it'd be good, but I thought being a historical, it might be a bit slow going or whatever. It's really fun. I was really surprised, like how much humour there is in that story. Like it's a historical, but it's got so many fun moments. I was really pleasantly surprised how much I enjoyed it. Like, I not that I wasn't expecting not to enjoy it, but I thought, I don't know, sometimes the historicals are a bit boring, and especially when it's just audio, I thought, oh, it's not going to be a bit of a slog, is it, to get through? Oh, mate, it was really good, and I kept thinking all the way through. There's a bit where the Doctor's dressing up, and the second Doctor's really funny in it, and I kept thinking, God, I really wish this existed. I would love to see this. There were so many scenes where I was thinking I'd love to see what this looked like. So that is a really good shout, and obviously it's Fraser's first story as well, the introduction of Jamie McCrimmon. So yeah, I actually might go for the Highlanders, the same as you, because having now listened to it quite recently, I think that is a great story, really good fun. So yeah, let's go with the Highlanders. Come on, they've got to be out there somewhere, right?
Yeah, there has to be. I don't know whether we'll see it in the next some of these stories. You always hear little rumblings, don't you, and rumours. Like there are certain Facebook groups and groups on Twitter and stuff like that, and they'll always say, "We know where some episodes are, and we've just found whatever." Usually, nothing ever comes of it. I think there's just a bit of attention seeking there from certain people and whatnot. But it would be great, mate, to imagine, right? There's probably in someone's loft or in someone's garage somewhere, there's a box, no labels on it, nothing. It's just waiting for somebody to open the box, and there's a bunch of pristine TV cans.
Oh, imagine.
With every classic. Can you just imagine, dudes? Oh. There must be them. They're out there somewhere. Let's not lose faith that they'll be found at some point.
It is so cool.
We just need them to be found in our lifetime.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you could just get a move on while we're still here. Yeah, I mean, it is lovely, isn't it? When you sort of you hear rumours and then suddenly there's an announcement. You're like, oh my God, it was true. I think there is one story, and I'm hoping it's not the Highlanders, because this has just popped into my head as we're talking. I remember there's one story. I think it is a Fraser one. I might be wrong. So one of our listeners will know. I think there's one story that was never sort of repeated abroad. So in other words, there was no copy sent anywhere apart from the one the BBC had, which was junked. So they always say, well, that one will never turn up because there was never a second copy made. Because a lot of the ones that do turn up are the ones that, got copied and sent abroad for repeats and stuff like that. But there is one story, and I forget which one it is. I really hope it's not Highlanders. I'm just having a quick look on Wikipedia. I'm sure one of our listeners will know. But yeah, there is one, and I'm pretty sure it's the second Doctor one that apparently can never... Maybe it's... might be Wheel in Space, is it? Not sure. Anyway, there is one that sadly I think will never turn up, but I hope it's not the Highlanders.
Well, you say that. That's just the that's the original studio tapes, and anything that was sent abroad, like you say. But I'm pretty sure we have had a couple of stories turn up where somebody has recorded a repeat of Doctor Who on VHS, and they've managed to extract that from the... Obviously, that's being a VHS tape as source material is going to be awful. But I think with technology we've got now, I think they might be able to do a semi-decent job of cleaning it up somewhat. So as well as relying on like the original tapes and all that stuff turning up somewhere, there's probably a bigger chance of somebody... because we reported on this story, didn't we, a couple of years ago, where I think sadly somebody had died, but they were a huge television and film buff, and they had like 6,000 VHS tapes in their collection where they had recorded like a complete series of like loads of shows and everything, and there was loads of Doctor Who there.
Yeah.
And all that stuff. So, you know, like I said, VHS it's pretty poor, but you could do something with it perhaps. So there's probably, you know, another couple of hundred people in the country who their granddad or their parents or whatever had recorded, you know, repeats of Doctor Who when they put it on. So it's out there somewhere. Those episodes are there. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying,
You know what
mate.
I mean?
But not in the 60s, though. They wouldn't have had VHS. That's the problem.
Well, that's what I mean. It would have been a repeat. So like when,
Oh, I see.
you know,
Yes,
when
yeah,
BBC
like
Two,
the Faces of Doctor Who
you know.
repeats, or yeah. And also there is
UK Gold, I think in the UK. Yeah.
There is a company at the minute, isn't there, that's just found a stash of film cans, and they're sorting through them at the moment, and that fills me with a little bit of hope, because they have said there's a lot of BBC in there, and they've been working with them, you know, with what they've got, and they've said, you know, we've agreed not to make announcements until they're ready. And I thought, because I think they found all sorts in there, lots of some Dad's Army and Steptoe and Son and things like that, stuff that I think's already in the vault but could be a better copy of it, you know. So there is still a chance. Like you said, we never give up hope. We're missing episodes. There is still a chance there's a Doctor Who one in that stash. I don't know I keep forgetting what the company's called, but you've probably seen them tweeting quite a bit recently that they're an archive company that have got a new stash of goodies to sort through.
That sounds good.
Yeah, so we
Fingers
never give
crossed
up
then,
hope.
there's something there. Never give up, never surrender. It's a good.
There you go.
It's a good motto that I live by, anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anyway, dude. Hopefully these things will turn up, and we can appreciate them while we're still here. We're not old, but you know, it would be nice for them to get a little bit.
But we ain't getting any younger.
So exactly, yeah. And so this is like a call to everyone that listens to the podcast. I suppose if you've got any kind of relative that you know had a VHS player and was a fan of taping things, go and have a little shimmy around the loft or the garage and just have a looky. You never know. Right. You and I have done very little by way of Doctor Who this week. We've only watched The Chase. We haven't really done anything Doctor Who. No events, no books or anything like that. So we are going to crack on with a little bit of news. Let's talk about this report that's come through from the BBC. So let's dive into that.
Okay.
Alrighty, so the BBC have released their annual report, which they do every year, and it's like it's like their own internal assessment of how they think they've done basically for the year. So it's to quote the BBC themselves, it says, each year we publish our annual reports and accounts, which contains our assessment of how we have delivered our mission and public purposes, and the extent to which the commitments set out in the annual plan, as well as regulatory and other commitments, have been met. This year's annual report and accounts provides details on some of the cultural, social, and economic achievements during 2023/2024. So I think it saddles 2 years because they do it partway through the year. So this is the one for 23/24. And the reason why I think it would be cool to dig in just a couple of little bits quickly on this, we're not going to go into the whole thing because it covers literally all of the BBC. So all of their programming, all of their earnings and transparency around that, things around governance and, you know, how they're delivering their creative remits and the future for the BBC. It's all there, you know. I'll stick a link in the show notes if you're... You know, if you want to dive into that, have a look, you know, feel free. But there is a little bit about Doctor Who. And they mention Doctor Who a few times in the report. And what I think is interesting about this is just you and I, when we spoke about this briefly earlier, we said, is this a little bit of damage control? Is this a little bit of, yes, they've they know that the however irrelevant we think ratings are these days, especially overnight ratings, and however we think the BBC think they're irrelevant. You know, we can't get away from the fact that those numbers were not there for this series of Doctor Who compared to all the other previous. I think there was something I saw online somewhere that Jodie's era got a bit more in terms of like the overnights and stuff. We'll come to that in a second. But the BBC have basically said, look, we think that this new era of Doctor Who, in partnership with Disney, has been brilliant, basically. So the first thing that they mention is they praise the impact that Doctor Who has had, as they say that ratings overall, when season 1 had concluded, they continue to grow on iPlayer. So this is not like your traditional, here in the UK, BBC One terrestrial almost channel sort of thing going on. This is just online, whether you're watching BBC iPlayer through the app on Apple TV or on a laptop or whatever, on a smart TV. They say that the ratings for iPlayer have grown and they continue to grow. They also say that that Doctor Who was mentioned a few times as one of the shows that's driving the corporation's huge audiences, as well as mentioning its economic impact in Wales and across the UK. So what they're saying is, you know, while Doctor Who has continued to be made and produced here in the UK and specifically Wales, that's creating jobs for people and it's helping the local sort of area with all the people that do work on the show, which is cool. They then go on to mention this Whoniverse thing, which is something new that they've launched with this new era and with Shooty's era and so on. And they say that they are dedicated to making sure it's the home for all shows that orbit around Doctor Who. So what they include in that, just very briefly, is it sounds like a bit of a teaser for like future spin-offs, but what they actually mean is all of the stuff that they've whacked on iPlayer that wasn't there previously. So previously, if you wanted to watch classic Doctor Who online, you had to go on something like BritBox because they had the contract to Classic Who and so on. But you know, since Russell came back and one of his things on the checklist seemingly was to get everything on iPlayer, which I think they accomplished for the most part. Yeah. And they then say that in the report that Doctor Who has had an explosive return to TV, and explaining that the BBC and Disney have come together to transform Doctor Who into a global franchise for UK audiences and the rest of the world. They also mention the 60th anniversary specials and say that that's one of the year's content highlights, alongside Eurovision and the third season of Planet Earth. So it's up there with like the big shows that the BBC have done. And the latest figures for season 1 that were reported first of all by The Times say that it's the highest rated drama for young viewers, which is the under 35s category, across all of the BBC for the year, which is pretty cool. I think Russell mentioned that as well, dude. In an interview, he said that, yeah, that the overnights and all that kind of status quo when you're talking about viewing figures for shows, I think he did say that quite disappointed that they weren't there in that respect, but for the under 35s, the figures for that has grown huge across not just iPlayer but just the BBC. They said that the overnight ratings for the season had been lower than is typically the case due to the release strategy. So they mentioned that each episode went out at midnight on Fridays, several hours before the BBC One broadcast on a Saturday evening. So they've mentioned that that's had an impact on how they view the overnight figures, because it's, you know, by the time you get to the BBC One show on Saturday, a large portion of people have already watched it on iPlayer. So it skews how they view the overnights and so on. But they said, so a spokesperson then goes on to say that overnight ratings no longer provide an accurate picture of all those who watch drama in an on-demand world. They said that this season of Doctor Who premiered on iPlayer nearly 24 hours before broadcast, and episode 1 has already been viewed by 6 million viewers and it continues to grow. So that's the other thing, just to finish on this report that they mention, is that because of the world we live in now, and I've spoken about this many times, but the world that we live in now, you cannot just judge the program on the overnight figures or even the weekly figures anymore, because they're saying that even now, episode 1, which came out, how many weeks ago was that now? Episode 1.
8 weeks?
I don't know. Yeah. Space Babies, Devil's Cord, week 2 of the 1st of May?
Yeah, it would have
second
been,
week of May, something like that. So, so it's a couple of months old now, and they are saying that still the viewing figures for that first episode is continuing to grow now. So it's difficult to say after a week's worth of figures, yep, it's done well, or no, it hasn't. It's just a different world we're in. So, dude, that's the main highlights of the report. Basically, the BBC are saying, look, from our point of view, the only kind of negative is that the overnights weren't what we would typically see, but then they sort of caveat that with saying, but hey, look, it's cool because we don't live in that world anymore where the overnights determine whether something's done well or not. And then the rest of the comments are all basically saying, yep, it's done well for under 35s internationally, rocking and rolling now, all that stuff. So what do you make of this, dude? They're basically saying that from their point of view, season 1 has been a huge success. It's been good.
Yeah, I mean, I can't blame them for trying to put a positive spin on it. I mean, of course they're going to do that. And, and it's right to point out positives as well as things that perhaps haven't gone as well as they thought. But there are things in that report I just can't agree with, like when it says it came back with a bang and has gone global and stuff. I just don't think that is true. I think it came back with a whimper. It hasn't. I don't think it captured the public imagination anywhere near what they thought it was going to. And the thing is, mate, I don't want to be down on Doctor Who, but you get your people out there that love to just be negative all the time about it. They just love to put it down, even though they like the show. And I think a lot of that comes from frustration. I'm not criticising those people. I think a lot of it comes from they've got themselves in a certain ruck where, they used to love this show, but it's not what they want, and it's not how they want it to be anymore, so they constantly criticise it. But then you've got your people, that are sort of more easygoing about it. They kind of go with the rough and the smooth, and they find things to like about it, and they find things they don't like about it. And then you've got your overly positive people that just love everything. And then I've just felt after this series ended that pretty much across the board of all those people, there's been a consensus of dissatisfaction. So even those people that, and I'm talking about YouTubers I watch now that are usually very positive, I'm thinking of people like the Review of Death who always give a very balanced review. I watched their video the other day saying, did it work? And they were saying, no, it didn't. And I thought, God, these guys are normally like, they always try and and I'm not saying they were negative, but they were really giving a really balanced review about why it didn't work. And I would say probably I agree with a lot more of what they were saying than in this report. It's just, I don't hear anybody outside, the sort of little social circle of Doctor Who fans talking about it. I don't think it's been a success, this first series. I think it's done okay. Of course, the iPlayer figures are going to increase. So it's not like it's going to stop dead just because the episode. That to me, to be honest, mate, I'll cut to the chase. I think. And I don't blame the BBC for doing this, but I think they are really clutching at straws to try and put a positive spin on what hasn't really been a big success. I think they've got a lot of work to do to get things back on track for Series 2. That's my personal opinion. I mean, they might disagree. The BBC may well be happy with how the show's performed, but if it was me in charge of it, I would be a bit concerned and I'd be looking to see where we could improve on things. I think the thing with the overnight figures as well, I kind of can buy into that a little bit because they've been releasing the episodes at midnight, so that is going to affect the overnight figure. I absolutely understand that, so I agree with them on that. But overall, mate, most of this report, I feel like I'm just kind of shaking my head thinking, no, sorry. I don't. I want to agree with them. I want to think it was a success, but I don't. I just feel like Series 1 did not hit the mark, and it doesn't really matter actually. Any of the, if you take away the viewing figures, if you take away everything surrounding it, all the sort of guff that surrounds Doctor Who at the minute, take it all away and strip it back and say, was it a good series? And I can only speak for myself. In my opinion, the first series wasn't that good. There were good moments, there were the odd bits here and there, but there's not one episode that I'm particularly bothered about going back and rewatching at the minute. There's not one that I think, you know what, I feel like sticking on so-and-so tonight. Even Boom, which I thought was a good episode, I'm in no rush to rewatch it. And when a series hasn't got that rewatchability, for me, it's just not a good series. So, yeah, but as I said, I don't want to be down on it. I understand they've got to put their positive spin on things, but I have to say, personally, I disagree with some of the stuff that they're saying. But I understand why they're saying it. What do you think?
Yeah, and I think that's the crux of the matter, right? It's we have to appreciate that this is their point of view. This is what they're saying is how they feel it's gone. So it's always going to be a little bit like they're never going to come out and say, and this is a sad fact about the BBC as a whole, it's that they rely on the TV license to fund, the majority of the stuff. And so they're never going to come out and say, yeah, we did bad. And yeah, this was bad, because that's just never going to happen. So although it's honest to a degree in that they highlight a couple of things that didn't quite go to plan, or they weren't 100% happy with, it's still got that, yeah, we think everything's been amazing. So it reminds me a little bit of in a couple of previous jobs I had when I managed a team and I was doing people's annual review. And they came in and I knew full well that they hadn't done as well as they could have done, but they've sat there and said, I think I've had a great year. I think I've had a great year. I've done this and I've done that. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, you've had an okay year.
Yeah.
There are certain things that we really need to address and we really need to, to sort out to improve things. So you've had an okay year. So it feels a little bit like that. The Beeb have said, they haven't torn themselves to shreds, put it that way. And you wouldn't expect them to do so anyway. But yeah, it's an interesting take nonetheless.
It kind of reminds me a bit of, like when a politician will put out a statement and they have to spin everything to make it sound positive. It just kind of reminds me of that. It's like, well, I can't go out and say the truth. Obviously we can't go out and say everything was, bad or put ourselves down. So we've got to try and find a way to make this sound good. And that's what the whole report, sounds like to me. It's like, and I think that is the nature of a report like this. It's to sort of come out and show the positives. But I think my only concern with it is I hope that they are, it's no good to just focus on positives with anything. You've always got to look and see how you could do things better. I'm talking about just everyday life now. Every job we do, we have to sit down and look and say, what did we get right? What did we get wrong? What can we do better next time? And I'm sure there is. I would just like to think there is a sense of that. With the BBC, because you don't get any of that from this report, but then maybe that's not the point of this report. But I'm pretty sure they must be sitting down thinking, right, what can we do better for Series 2? Although it's already filmed, so that's another concern.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, more than anything, you would hope that just the stuff that they've gone through with this first season, you would just hope that it's difficult to say because season 2 has already been filmed and already done.
Yeah.
So you can't really say, right, we'll take some of the feedback from, the audience and all that stuff. Not that you would use that as a tool to like remold the show and do everything. You want to stick to your creative vision, I guess.
Exactly.
From Russell's point of view and deliver something that you feel is good. So you don't just want to be like a knee-jerk reaction like, oh, there's a small group of fans that don't like that, so we'll take it out or we'll do that. I don't mean that, but you need to get an overall, I think, kind of view of how the audience is taking the show. Not just the hardcore Doctor Who fans, but just the audience in general. But they can't do that because they've already done it, or it's already done. So one would hope that the chances are we will get a season 3. I know there was a bit of chatter around that even. Is Doctor Who going to have a season 3? I'm pretty sure it will. So hopefully, as Russell's going through that now and the writing for all that, there will be a little bit of, right, okay, we know what resonated with fans on the whole with season 1. And, if they take season 2 into account as well, we know what didn't really hit the mark and that sort of thing. So we'll tweak that a little bit. But yeah, it's just fascinating to see, the other side of the fence, because like you said, I think the majority of fandom overall views it as it wasn't too bad. It certainly wasn't this big, explosive, huge, massive success that they coin it to be. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to think they're going to come back with
That's the report from the Beeb.
Yeah, I'd like to think they're going to come back with a stronger second season. I think it's not just about the stories, mate. I think the stories need to be stronger. I think now Shooty's got a series under his belt. He can fly a bit, and hopefully he's got some good stories to see him through the next season. But I think they need to think about other things like this midnight drop as well, how that's affecting it. I think they need to tone in some of the stuff that they've been saying in interviews and telling fans, to bog off and all this sort of. I think they need to look at a lot of things, not just about the show itself, but also about their conduct surrounding it and promoting it, because I think that could help it as well. But yeah, we'll see. Anyway, like I said, an interesting report. Don't agree with a lot of it, but interesting to hear their BBC side of it all the same.
Yeah, indeedy. So no other news to go through, dude. Nothing of note anyway, but that was the news. Before we crack on with our review of The Chase, just a friendly reminder just to nudge you in the direction of the follow or the subscribe button if you don't yet follow us in whatever app you listen to your podcasts on, especially if this is the first time you listen to Big Blue Box. And welcome aboard. It's good to have you here. And also the old grizzled ancients. It's great to have you here as always. But yeah, make sure you're following or subscribing. That way you won't miss an episode. They go out every week, every Friday, and also the monthly roundtable episodes where we draft in the writing team and we chat Doctor Who with those guys. You can also listen and connect with us over on the socials, do everything on a website, which is bigblueboxpodcast.co.uk, and check out the reviews and articles from the writing team there as well. And also don't forget to remember to check out my co-host channel over on YouTube. It's called The Geek's Handbag.
The Geek's Handbag, yeah. Lots of unboxings and Doctor Who vids on there, and you can go and have a little look at that recent review I did of the Highlanders, if you like. That was quite a cool little vid that I did recently. So yeah, check out my channel, The Geek's Handbag.
The Geek's Handbag, indeed. Excuse me. Right. Right, got a frog in my throat.
Same, mate. A bit dry today. I don't know what's going on. Yeah.
Excuse me. Right. On to our review, bud. What is it this week?
Yeah, so as we mentioned, this is the last complete story that we haven't reviewed so far, and it's the first Doctor story, The Chase.
The operation will proceed at once. The Doctor and the 3 humans must be destroyed. Exterminate them! Exterminate! Exterminate! Exterminate!
Doctor, come quickly!
Daleks cannot be defeated. They will pursue the humans through all eternity. Annihilate!
Get out! Oh, what's nothing?
They will destroy what remains of our city.
They mean what they say. They don't make idle threats.
We mustn't let our imaginations run away with us.
Activate the robot.
The Daleks need it, exactly like you.
You will infiltrate and kill.
We shall fight to the death.
Exterminate!
Another good trailer.
Exciting stuff.
Yeah. Exciting stuff indeed, yeah. Alrighty, The Chase. It was first broadcast back on the 22nd of May, 1965. It's a 6-parter, finished up on the 26th of June. It was written by Terry Nation, directed by Richard Martin, overseen by Dennis Spooner. He was a script editor at the time, and this is obviously back in the day of the old Verity Lambert production days.
Yes.
It stars William Hartnell as the first Doctor, William Russell as Ian Chesterton, Jacqueline Hill as Barbara Wright, and Maureen O'Brien as Vicky, and then a fairly sizable supporting cast throughout each episode. And the synopsis is: the travellers learn from the time-space visualizer taken from the Morocks Museum that Daleks equipped with their own time machine are on their trail with orders to exterminate them, and they flee in the TARDIS. The chase begins on the desert planet Iridius and takes in a number of stopping off points, including a spooky haunted house, which is actually a futuristic funfair attraction. Eventually, both time machines arrive on the jungle planet Mechanus, where the Daleks try to infiltrate and kill the Doctor's party with a robotic double of him. The travellers are taken prisoner by the mechanoids, robots sent some 50 years earlier to prepare landing sites for human colonists who never arrived, and meet Stephen Taylor, a stranded astronaut who has been the mechanoids' captive for the past 2 years. The Daleks and the mechanoids engage in a fierce battle which ends in their mutual destruction. The Doctor's party seizes this opportunity to escape. The Doctor reluctantly helps Ian and Barbara to use the Daleks' time machine to return home. That's your rundown of the chase. So, buddy, what are your thoughts on this one then, out the gate?
This is a bonkers six-parter, isn't it? This is crackers. I don't know what I made of this, because I think it goes from being like it goes from some really good stuff to some of the worst stuff. I don't know. 1 minute I'd find myself thinking it was really fun, then I'd find myself getting really bored, and this is all in about the space of 10 minutes. I'm talking like even in just by episode by episode. And then I would think, oh, that was a good bit. That was a good fight sequence. And then you get the robot doctor, and suddenly Frankenstein and Dracula are coming in. And there's a lot to take in with this story, mate. And I think I'm still processing it, because I got to the end of it last night, and I was just like, I just couldn't quite comprehend what I'd watched. So in terms of enjoyment, for the most part, I enjoyed it. But it's sort of extremes. It's not one that I can say is sort of consistently good or bad. It just goes from being good to really bad to good to being really bad to having a really emotional ending, that almost reduced me to tears because it's so beautiful and understated. I'm really, really mixed on this one, mate. I love the concept. I like the idea that they can, a bit like with other First Doctor stories that we've had, where the whole sort of 6 parts are almost like their own little contained story. So we have a different setting for each episode. I like that, hence why we can land in bonkers settings like the haunted castle and have Dracula and Frankenstein throwing Daleks across the room. I mean, that is just crazy, and I kind of love all that stuff. But then you go from that to these fish people on whatever planet that was, and it's really slow and a bit of a slog. And there were moments where I was really, really finding this hard going, and then all of a sudden it jumps back in and something really good happens, like a Dalek gets pushed off the Mary Celeste into the sea. I don't know. It's just a very uneven 6-parter for me. I think overall I enjoyed it, but I also think some of it was so bad that I can't say it was good. So I'm conflicted. I'm conflicted, mate. I think some of the production sort of lets it down, but then you've got really good sets like the Mary Celeste boat and the castle and stuff like that. And then you've got the mechanoid and the Dalek fight at the end, which is absolutely fantastic. That sort of little sequence at the end, which lasts about a minute. But then 2 minutes before that, you've got the Doctor and Vicky and Barbara almost falling off a cliff, and it's really badly done. Not off a cliff, off the building, whatever it is, the city. And it's really badly done where they're trying to pretend to go down it on a rope, and it's just so awkward. So you sort of go from that to a really good battle between mechanoids and Daleks, which is well shot and really exciting and could be out of a 1950s film. It's good enough to be on the big screen. But yeah, I'm conflicted, mate. I don't know I just don't know what I made of it. But I think overall, I think I mostly enjoyed it. What about yourself?
You mostly, yeah.
I think I mostly enjoyed it.
I'm on board with what you said. Yeah, I'm on board with what you mentioned about it being completely bonkers. It does have that weirdness to it. Bearing in mind this is the 60s, right? So, it's a time when things were a little bit bonkers for TV, for sure. And you can definitely tell that there's some some weirdness going on just because of this being a story of its time. Most notably in the Dalek ship, they've got these weird spiral patterns up on the wall that spin around and do all that stuff. It just screams 60s, you know. Yeah. So it's definitely one of those, and I make that sound weird because of course it's of its time. This is a black and white classic Who from the 60s, but there's quite a few other classic Who stories from the 60s and early 70s that are in some ways way ahead of their time in terms of storytelling for TV and production and all that stuff. Excuse me. So, but this one definitely feels like you're watching an old 60s story. It does. So it's bonkers in some respects, like, you know, going to the whole, you know, haunted house thing was just weird. Even though you could see what they were trying to do once they left, and then you go back and see the sign that it's actually a futuristic fairground ride or whatever. You know, it's all weird. So yeah, and the other thing is that it's kind of weird that they chose to do this kind of like the Daleks are in pursuit of the Doctor and everybody in the TARDIS. So the Doctor stops off at these various places. The Daleks are behind them. They're always like a step behind, and it culminates with this battle of nothing to do with the Doctor. That's the bit I found weird about it. It's like, you know, you obviously couldn't have it going on forever. You couldn't have a story where, you know, the Doctor's being chased by something forever, or something's behind him constantly chasing. Sutek, I don't know. We'll talk about that different time. But you couldn't have, you know, you have to cap the story somewhere. You have to finish it somewhere. But it's weird that the Doctor and those guys really didn't have much to do with the Doctor's with the Daleks' demise in the end. It all just came down to a bit of a scrap between two metallic, you know, whatever. Yeah. So I found that weird that throughout the whole thing, you know, it was kind of cool, like this cat and mouse thing, and then at the end it was just, oh, we're just gonna go up on the roof and have a look around. Those guys can fight it out, you know, whatever. So yeah, overall, I enjoyed it, dude. There was a few episodes where I thought, okay, this is really going on a bit now. Yeah, as you'd expect with classic Who, it's very paddy in some places and stuff, but not a terrible watch, dude. I found it reasonably enjoyable. What did you think to the sets and the production on this one? Because typically with Dalek stories, it goes one or two ways. It either looks pretty good, or it looks like they're just wobbling all over the place and non-threatening and a bit funny. So what was your view on that?
There is one bit where the Dalek's sort of trotting across the Camber Sands beach, which is quite funny, isn't it? You can tell the guy, he's just walking underneath the Dalek. I guess that's the best they could do back then. But production-wise, mate, I can see that effort's gone into it. You know, some of the sets look great. As I said, the Mary Celeste and all the stuff of them falling off of it into the water and stuff all looks pretty good for the time. But then you've got stuff like the mushroom things in episode 6, which look terrible. They look like something out of Play School, you know, and when Vicky's being captured by them, Maureen O'Brien just seems like she can't be bothered. It's just like, oh, it's got me. Oh, you know, there are scenes like that which are really weak, and I think the production lets it down. But yeah, then you've got like the sets of the haunted house, which is pretty cool, with the fireplace where its eyes light up and stuff. I think production-wise, I think they've done a best they can. But for every good thing, like the sets and that, you've got a bad thing like the fish people, which look terrible. I mean, they're just guys in leotards with some stickers put on their, you know, on their outfits and stuff. And the TARDIS looks like it's literally about to collapse at any moment. I mean, that poor old prop, and this is still early days, and that prop is absolutely bad to heck. But overall, mate, production-wise, it's okay. I mean, the Dalek coming up in the sand at the end, it's a unfortunate thing that I think they say they tried to film that for real, with a real Dalek coming out of the sand, and they had to abandon the filming and replace it with a model shot, which again, it's okay for the
Okay.
time, but it doesn't quite work. And I don't know why the Dalek's making this weird noise. It's not a very impactful cliffhanger, is it? Where he's going, and I'm like, what's wrong? What's it doing? I wasn't quite sure what was going on there. So things like that don't really work, but it's a bit of its time. But production-wise, overall, I think for the time it was made is fairly good for the most part.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad, was it?
I mean, the mechanoids look good, don't they? I think maybe they should have come into it a bit sooner because, they look like a cool 60s. I mean, they're big, cumbersome things. They're bulky and clumsy. But, at the time, they probably would have looked quite exciting as a sci-fi thing. But they're only in episode 6. I mean, they come into it at the episode 5, don't they? But I wonder if they should have come into it a bit sooner.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's kind of cool as well. A bit cumbersome.
Very.
But the concept was really cool with those as well. These machines that had been sent to these planets to make sure everything's going to be cool. So by the time the humans land, these guys have already, cleaned up and sorted everything out. And done all that. And it just turns out that there was something that happened on Earth, and the humans were like, right, we're not going to do that today. We're not going to go to that planet anymore. So, Steve, sorry, dude, you're on your own, mate.
Yeah.
So conceptually they were kind of cool, but for me they were just a little bit too close to the Dalek design for that.
Yeah,
they needed something that wasn't a rolling. Well, it's hard to explain. We need something that wasn't a rolling, just machine of something. But nonetheless, they were kind of cool. Not going to complain too much about those guys.
But the sets themselves looked pretty decent, didn't they, for the time, I thought? The actual sets.
Oh, the sets, dude. Yeah, they were kind of cool. Yeah, I mean, especially things that you wouldn't expect to have to do, I guess, as a set designer back then. You had, like the top of the Empire State Building was very cool.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that bit, yeah.
You hadn't really seen... I mean, that's just an everyday, location on Earth. That's nothing. You're not creating this weird, crazy alien planet somewhere. You're trying to recreate an actual place, and that wasn't too bad. And then you're also trying to recreate an old ship, which turned out to be the Mary Celeste, I think, wasn't it?
That's it.
And so, yeah, it's... I think the designers on this one probably would have had a field day, because on one hand you're trying to create these alien planets, with the big mushroom plants and all that sort of thing. But then at the end of the day, you're also just rooting yourself in real world stuff as well. So you had, like I said, these locations. But then at the very end, where you've got Ian and Barbara who have decided that they want to go home, they've had enough. And they're having a whale of a time, and that's just shot in central London. All these, photographic stills and everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, production-wise, very cool, dude.
It's a very ambitious script, isn't it? I mean, for a Doctor Who 6-parter, it must have stretched the budget to an absolute limit, I assume, because of all the different settings and the sets and everything. Especially as each episode has its own set, pretty much. Yes, it's very ambitious. It must have put a bit of a toll on what they could actually create on the little money they had. And I do think for the most part they do a pretty decent job, really. As I said, there are things that let it down, like the fish people and the mushroom monsters, but then you can kind of overlook that because you've got cool sets like the castle and the Mary Celeste, and even the desert stuff looks pretty okay, in episode 2. So yeah, I think they did pretty good with the little budget they had, to be fair.
Yeah, they did all right.
I have to say, I think it's the...
And,
sorry.
So yeah.
Damn delay.
No, go on, dude.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it was around the Empire State Building. That episode is where I started to tune out a little bit. I feel a lot of people like that because they liked seeing Peter Purvis doing Morton Dill, but I was getting a bit irritated by him, if I'm honest. I think I'm probably slightly in the minority there. We'll come on to the characters anyway, but that's the episode where it's probably my least favourite one, the whole Empire State stuff, because it doesn't really serve any purpose. They kind of just land there and have a bit of a chat, and then the Daleks land there, and it's all kind of played for laughs. And that's the episode I felt was I was starting to get a bit, but then it picks up a bit after that. So
yeah, you're right. It does get a bit Carry On.
It does,
like an old Carry On film.
Yeah.
At the Empire State Building. But yeah, so okay, so and in terms of this being a 6-parter, were you sort of captivated by each episode, or were there moments where you reached for your phone, or did you find some of it paddy and ploddy? Or was it a case of you were just, how did you watch it, by the way? Because I did this 3 and 3.
Oh yeah, same actually. I did it 3 and 3 as well. It was really, I think the first 2 episodes I liked. Then it's the Empire State ones, I think episode 3, is that right? I forget now, but that's that. I did find myself getting bored during that episode. Yep. And then, it picked up a bit. I thought the castle one was really fun. I have to be honest, mate, although it's easy to laugh at that episode, because you've got Frankenstein, Dracula, all that crazy stuff going on, and it is ridiculous. But do you know what? There's a weirdness about it that I think if I was a kid back in 1960, what would this have been? This is 64. When was this? When did this go out?
65.
65, is it? If I was a kid back in 1965, mate, a young kid, I think I would have found this quite scary. The castle episode I'm talking about, because there's a lot of stuff going on in the shadows. There's a weird bit where that woman screams. There's a bit where a skeleton drops down out of nowhere. There are things that now as an adult you sort of find funny and a bit trippy, but I reckon if I was a kid in 1965, like a 7 or 8 year old, I would have found that quite a scary episode. I think it's one of those episodes would have stuck in my mind for quite a long time, if you know what I mean. And it would have been one that you'd sort of want to watch again as an adult to see if it was how you remembered it, and then it would be nowhere near as scary or as good as you remembered it as a kid. But I bet you back in the day, mate, that was quite a fun episode for kids, that one, and quite a scary one. But after that, I mean, I can't even remember episode 5. That's where that's the mushroom fungi one. That got a bit boring. But then again, the mechanoids come into it for episode 6, and then it really picks up. So it's very much, it's uneven. I think you've got some really good episodes, and then you've got a lot of padding, sort of in between. But for the most part, I was fairly entertained.
Oh, cool. Yeah, same for me, dude. I think for the most part, like you said, that I think as you get into episode 3 and 4, it starts to have these elements of sort of comedy thrown in.
Yeah.
That I'm not sure who instigated or did that. So even small things that you wouldn't necessarily think, okay, this could be a funny moment, they turned into a funny moment, like when Vicky accidentally knocks out Ian.
Oh,
the way that she does it, when they're on the ship.
Yeah,
the way that happens, that again feels very slapsticky.
Yeah,
because she sort of bonks him on the head, and he does this weird face. It's not a realistic collapse to the ground because I've just been smashed over the head. It's more of a wide-eyed, funny step around for a few seconds. And even afterwards, when they're back in the TARDIS, and Barbara says, you have to admit it was quite funny.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I didn't see the funny side because you weren't the one that was just knocked out. But so yeah, it was weird because in the first episode and the last episode, you don't really get any of that, like the humor side of things and all that stuff is not there. It's not present, but it is in the middle side of it, like we mentioned with the Empire State Building stuff, that whole Carry On film bit where the guy turns round and then the TARDIS is gone and he's like, oh, this is crazy, and then he turns around again. By the time he's getting his camera sorted out and all the rest of it, the Dalek ship's there, and what makes that a bit even funnier is that the Dalek doesn't even do anything. Like normally the Dalek would be like, you're of no use to me, so extermination it is. But the Dalek just follows him around and doesn't do anything and then buggers off. And then when he tries to get his camera ready again, they've disappeared. So you have this really strange vibe about some of it. And it's almost like you're watching a Scooby-Doo story in some parts. Especially when you get to the haunted house bit, you expect the Frankenstein's monster to be like a robot, like the head mask comes off. It's like, oh, it was a robot all along.
Yeah.
That kind of thing, and it's a bit funny. So yeah, dude, I found myself watching each part mostly captivated by it, but at the same time a little bit like, oh, a lot of this is sort of unnecessary humour and superfluous. If you're going to inject humour in there, it's fine if the story calls for that, and it's then it's all good. But I just felt like there were moments where they were trying to make it lighthearted and funny for the sake of it, without it adding too much to the story, if that makes sense.
No, it totally totally makes sense. It's very tonally uneven, isn't it? And I think some of the comedy music that comes in is supposed to enhance the sort of more comedy tones in certain episodes. Like you said, the bit where poor old Ian gets bopped on the head, and they sort of play in some comedy music and stuff. So yeah, tonally as a story, it's all over the place, and I think that can work, but it is quite jarring at times. Like there are bits where I'm like, I'm not sure, I'm not sure that quite works, but yeah. So no, I do know what you mean.
Yeah. Overall, though, like episode pacing and all that stuff. Yes, it's a wee bit ploddy and a wee bit paddy in certain places, but I've sat through way worse.
Oh yeah,
for Classic Who. So yeah,
it's entertaining in its own way.
Yes, yeah, of course, yeah. And what did you think to this being this as the title of the story suggests, it's about the Doctor being chased right through time and space. And I think even one of the episode titles is like, is it something through eternity?
Yeah, I can't remember what you're talking about.
Episode 3, Flight Through Eternity, and that kind of thing. And so before we move on to characters and stuff, what did you think to this concept that the Daleks are not in charge, basically? So they have a plan somewhat, which is very simplistic, which is just the Doctor must be exterminated. Simple as that. And there was a funny moment actually at the end of I think it's at the end of episode 2, The Death of Time, where or was it the end of episode 1, where they're all in the TARDIS. The Daleks try to destroy it, doesn't happen, and the TARDIS dematerializes and goes off. And the Daleks throw every adjective in there to basically get across to the viewer very succinctly, we want to kill the Doctor. Because they're all saying different things like obliterate, annihilate, all that stuff. And that then starts this whole thing around. So the Daleks don't have much of a plan other than they want to kill the Doctor. They're not in charge because they're always late. The Doctor's landed somewhere, have done their thing, escaped, and then the Daleks are chasing them again. And it's not until the last episode, really, that the Daleks have some kind of control over what's happening. But even then, they get overrun by the mechanoids and stuff. So as a Dalek story, not one of the best, because it feels like they're just sort of being towed along by the story, if you like. Yeah. They're not in charge of anything. They're just, yeah. So what do you think to that? What do you think to this as a Dalek story?
Yeah, it's a shame to see them, I'm sort of going to put this at Terry Nation's feet, really. It's a shame to see the Daleks just reduced to, for want of a better phrase, like you said, a Scooby-Doo villain, like, why, I'm going to get you and I'm going to chase you across the stars and all this sort of thing. It's a shame to see them reduced to that, such a simplistic villain, if you like, or monster, rather than being the Daleks that we saw in, Terry's first story, The Daleks, where they are really scary and mean and they've got a purpose for what they're doing. And obviously Dalek Invasion Earth, once again, they've got a plan and they're pretty scary and they're in charge. This one, they are literally just chasing after the Doctor, like, I'm going to get you. And it's a bit of a shame because I think it does diminish them, as characters, if you like. That said, I do think if you sort of, take the storyline away and stuff, the Daleks themselves are pretty decent in it, in the sense that I like the fact they've got all these different attachments. Like, I wish we saw more of this, actually. The more I watched it, I love the fact that the Daleks have got all these different things that they can, attached to their circle. I mean, that was quite an interesting idea. Like, one's got a little compass thing, one's got a flamethrower, and what else do they have? Well, they got a few things, haven't they? And I thought that was quite a nice idea. And, in the fight scene at the end, they're proper getting stuck in. And so the scenes they're in are fine. There's nothing wrong with the Daleks in themselves in terms of what we see from them on screen. It's just, as I say, it's just a shame that the actual story is just literally them chasing after the Doctor in some silly sort of Scooby-Doo-ish style storyline, if you like. It just seems a little bit childish. And I know you could argue it's a children's program made by, the children's department at the BBC and stuff. So you could say that. It's just a shame after the two Dalek stories we've had before, where they are treated very seriously in terms of why they're part of the story, to see them just sort of reduced to this, chase. For this series, it feels like Terry Nation couldn't really think what to do with them, and it was just a fun way to bring them back, if you like. There's no real sort of purpose to them other than the fact they want to get the Doctor. Oh, why I order kind of thing. It's a little bit, it's a little bit sort of sad in that respect. So, but I think they're good when they're in it. I just don't like the fact, don't like the reason they're in it, I guess.
Yeah, no, I had the same thought as that. It was more a case of the Daleks don't have anything else to do.
Yeah.
at this point, because normally it's the Daleks' plan is something like, we want to take over this entire planet, or these more grandiose things are like, we want to take over the universe, or whatever it might be. But in this instance, I mean, there's nothing particularly wrong with this. It's just like, we've had enough of the Doctor, so he's on the hit list. We need to take him out.
Yeah.
There's nothing, hugely wrong with that. It's just, a little bit simplistic. And that's, again, I don't want to come down too hard on it. It's not the end of the world. It's just, nothing. The Daleks are just there to... It's everything I'm saying sounds like an oversimplification. It's not. I apologise for that. But, the Daleks are there just to chase the Doctor. And I know that's incredibly obvious, but
that's kind of what it is, isn't it? That is the crux of the story, and it is simplistic, and it does feel a little bit lightweight for such a great villain after two really good stories that they've had in previous seasons. I just want to also say, mate, do you know what other thing I liked about the Daleks, as well as their attachments, was I like the fact they've all got different voices. That they are... So one of the Daleks has got quite a high-pitched voice, isn't he? There's one on the ship, and it's really high. We will get... He's getting really, carried away. And I thought, actually, I quite like this, because it gives more of a contrast to them. I like the days when we used to have more than one person. And no offence to Nick Briggs, great as the Daleks, but I wish they would go back to having a couple of people do the voices, because it does make them stand out more. Like when that one with the high-pitched voice starts kicking off, I thought it was really great. I loved it. I thought, oh, here he goes, look at him go, and it just adds a bit of variety to the Daleks rather than making them all sort of uniformed. And maybe that's kind of what they want in the new series, is to make them all feel generic and they're all the same and a bit, whatever. But yeah, I thought it was quite nice that they all seem to have their own, I wouldn't say personality, but their own voice, if you like. Different people voicing them.
I know what you mean. Yeah. And there was one of them had a very low pitched voice as well, and it was kind of cool.
It reminded me.
I don't mind that with those.
It reminded me a little bit of you remember in Remembrance the Daleks, when we first go on the Dalek spaceship, and I remember some of those Daleks, their voices were quite different as well, and there was one that had a bit of a high-pitched voice, and it really took me back to that. I thought, oh, they sounds a bit like the one in Remembrance, and so again, even back in sort of like the late 80s, they had lots of different people doing the voices. It just, I don't know, it just brings something extra to it, I think.
Agreed, dude. Yeah, I totally see what you're saying. Yeah. Okay, then, so let's talk about some I don't think there's anything else to go through story-wise. It's like we said, it's reasonably simple in this one. So in terms of characters and stuff, what did you think to the two dudes that we see near the beginning, the Iridians? We see a few of them, don't we? So they're in episode 2, I believe.
Yeah.
And so that's the death of Time. So the Iridians are essentially have been held to ransom by the Daleks, haven't they? The Daleks have said, you need to hand over the Doctor and his party, or you'll all be destroyed. Simple as that. So the Iridians they've gone into panic mode and have said, look, we don't want to do this, but we have no other choice. It's like we hand you over or we're all dead, sort of thing. And so those guys, they were sort of your typical guys in suits, sort of aliens and stuff that you'd expect from Classic Who. They were I was gutted to see a few of them die as well, because they just seem like real kind of soft, laid back, kind-hearted people, really. So it's always gutting when you see people. It would be different if they were beeps, You'd be like, all right, Daleks, do your thing. But yeah, it was gutting to see a few of them die. But the interaction between those guys and the Doctor and more so Ian and Barbara was very cool, because I found in this one, we'll come on to Hartnell anyway in a bit, but I found that Hartnell was a bit brash.
Yeah.
And a little bit, typical grumpy Hartnell in this one, which didn't really go down well with these guys too well. But these guys were kind of cool. So these guys were played by I don't even know if they've got actual names. I think Rhiannon, Prondin, and some other ones were there. So I don't know the actors' names to match them to the character names. But what did you think to the Iridians in this?
Yeah, I mean, they're very theatrical. I think they're very much of the time, aren't they? This is the sort of thing that sort of theatrical performance wouldn't work in Doctor Who now, but it has a real charm to it, watching it in an episode from back in the 60s. It's a shame that they're not realised particularly well. In terms of the costumes, look pretty bad. The caps they're wearing are pretty much falling off. And they're just wearing some glittery leotards. So they don't look particularly great. But like you said, mate, take all that away and actually just enjoy the story. And I also quite liked them, because you feel sympathy towards them, that they don't want to give the Doctor and Vicky and that to the Daleks, but they haven't got a choice really. And so the fact that they can look that ridiculous on screen, and the fact they are so theatrical, Doctor, and giving this type of performance and still make you feel something for them, I think has to be a testament to the actors in those costumes. So yeah, I thought they must have done something right, mate, because I felt sorry for them. So yeah, I think they did a good job.
Yeah, that's a good point, isn't it? Yeah, when you have the supporting cast who are really into the story, even if like as an actor back in the day you thought, oh, and I've landed this role in Doctor Who, it's only a one episode thing, and I'm not really a science fiction fan, I'm not really into that, and this is a bit weird. You would hope that, because we've had this a few times in the past where supporting actors they haven't got the memo, right?
Yeah.
They've turned up to be in Doctor Who, and they've just classed it as an everyday role. I'm an alien or I'm a baddie or whatever, but I'm going to talk like I do to my wife or somebody down the pub, and I'm not really going to give it my 100% all to make it as alien as it needs to be. Whereas I think these guys, they did get the memo, and you do have that sense of alienness about them, coupled with that kind of human sort of good heartedness and all that stuff. So
I'm sure I recognise one of them, mate. I'm sure. I'm trying to find him on the list because I can't say that. Huel Bennett, is that the one you said played Ryan? I don't know. He went on to do quite a lot.
Bennett,
if you click on his thing, because I recognise he's got a very distinctive face. That actor, he's got these great big eyes, and I recognised him even under all that stuff that he was wearing. I thought I've seen him in, back in the day. I think he used to be in quite a lot, but I can't think what he was most famous for. But do you know the guy I mean? Yeah, do you recognise him? He was sort of in sort of like very broad comedies back in the day, like Percy and the Virgin Soldiers.
So Doctor Who, this character was his that was his second ever acting role.
Oh, was it?
In Doctor Who. And then he went on to do just so many things. Yeah, like back in the day, like especially as you get into the 70s and 80s, he was in things like The Sweeney.
The Twilight Zone,
He was King Arthur, actually, in Robin of Sherwood.
Oh,
That's where I recognise him from.
right.
He was in Boone, all these
All
things,
the classics.
Casualty, all
The
these
Bill.
big British, all the things, yeah. He was in the Bill, he's in EastEnders for a little bit. Jack Dalton, apparently, in EastEnders.
Yeah.
He went on to do loads of things, mate. But he has got that face that we recognised, even under the makeup, as you said.
Yeah.
The Iridians on Iridius, I think of the planet Iridius. Yep. Those guys were kind of cool. And then we get on to, after they've left Iridius and we do this whole flight through eternity, we meet Peter Purvis, don't we, for the first time, but not as Stephen, as what's his name? Morton Dill, I think his name, the character name. Yeah. So he's trying his best, bless him, to do an authentic kind of New York accent. He's really, and some of it works really well. Like if you just pick out a few words and a few sentences here and there, he does do that relatively well, that accent, but it falls apart, unfortunately, in a lot of it, where he sort of drifts in and out of trying to say certain words a certain way and that kind of thing. But for me, like the complete opposite to when he's playing Stephen Taylor, really. Like in this one, I get it to a degree. He's probably been directed to be like, look, this is a bit of a humorous scene we've got going on here. So don't take it too seriously. Try and have fun with it a little bit. You're essentially this kind of, gobsmacked dude that you think that these movie film people are on here to sort of create tricks and do a bit of a publicity stunt. So just take it as that and just try and act in a sort of humorous way at things and stuff like that. So for me, dude, this is one of the weakest parts of the story. But so Peter Purvis, though, bless him, trying to do his best in this moment. But not the episode's finest hour.
So although I find Morton Dill as a character a bit irritating, I've got to take my hat off to Peter Purvis because he does manage to make him very different to Stephen Taylor, who obviously pops up in episode 6. And, you wouldn't have been able to go back and you might have recognised it, but, back in 1965, there were no VHSs or iPlayers, so you couldn't have gone back and said, he looks a bit familiar. Is that the same actor? I think he does play the two parts so very different that, you've got to take your hat off to him and say that he's taken what's on the page, absolutely gone for it as Morton Dill, and then delivered a completely different performance as Stephen Taylor. So, I think Peter Purvis does a good job in this, to be honest. And it's interesting, isn't it, that he got that part because they were so impressed by him as Morton Dill. And again, this is something that doesn't happen now, really. People get cast in advance, but they liked what they saw and said, let's get him on as a companion. And he was sort of drafted in that late in the production side of things that he just literally joined at the end of, at the end of this story. So, he must have done something to impress the Verity Lambert, I think it was, said, he's really good. Let's keep this
Verity.
guy on as the new companion,
Yeah, no, I agree, dude. Yeah. So although that scene might have been a bit like, whatever, it's you can't deny that Peter Purvis was going for it.
Oh, he absolutely goes for it. For sure, yeah.
Yep. Okay, what about the people on the ship then, the Mary Celeste? So this is where they land on the ship and then shortly after, so it's Vicky, isn't it, that runs into, I think it's one of the, so it's not Captain Benjamin Briggs, it's one of the other crewmen. She runs into him and, he's not happy because, from his point of view, she's a stowaway and so on, doesn't realise what's going on. And then shortly after, the Daleks turn up and there's that scene, isn't there, where one of the Daleks goes off into the water.
Yeah.
It's just really funny. That's the set for the ship was pretty cool. I have to say, it wasn't a small little thing. It was a decent sized set for this. But the guys that were playing the captain, so David Blake Kelly, I don't think he's been in anything else. But
no,
those guys were, they were kind of cool. So nothing really, what's the best way? Nothing really memorable that stands out from them. But those guys were still hired to do that job, and they did that reasonably well.
Yeah, I think they've got the right look for the part. Like you said, they don't really get much to do, but they don't stand out as being wrong in that scene, if that makes sense. They do sort of look the part. The guy's got the big sideburns, hasn't he, the captain and stuff. Apparently he had a hell of a hangover that morning, and they said so when he jumped in the water, it actually sobered him up. It says on the production notes, whoever the actor was. So he'd obviously been out and had a few the night before. So, but yeah, no, they're pretty cool for what they get to do.
Yeah. And then let's get on to the haunted house people. Then that's that's the typical. So we've got Count Dracula, played by Malcolm Rogers. We've got Frankenstein. So I'm always a bit picky about this. It's not Frankenstein, is it?
No.
It's Frankenstein's monster.
Yeah.
And that's played by John Maxim, which I think has been in a few other little bits. I think he was in a Bond film.
Was he?
As one of the extras and stuff. And he was actually in a lot of horror films. He was in The Brides of Dracula. He was in Dracula, Prince of Darkness, and some other bits. So like some low budget British films. But yeah, so you had Frankenstein's monster in there. And then you also had the screaming ghost lady, didn't you?
Yeah.
I don't think she's credited. Is she credited on this? I can't remember.
Is she just Grey Lady?
But Grey Lady, yeah. Rosalind D. Winter. Yeah, the Grey Lady. So, dude, this was one of the quirkiest bits of the story, right? So this is the bit where you think, what the bloody hell
is going
so
on?
Whenever, yeah, like when you and I first said, what are your thoughts on this one? You and I both said, yeah, it's bonkers. Yeah, it's crackers. And when most people talk about that, when they use those words to describe this story, it's normally this episode they're referring to. It's normally the thing. So this is episode 4, which is called Journey into Terror, that these guys show up in. And this is normally when people say the chase is crackers. It's because of this episode mostly, because you don't know what's going on. You think, is this because the Doctor tries to explain it to Ian, doesn't he, that we've landed in like some kind of weird human consciousness. This is like the human brain that's because the Doctor's trying to say, look, although these are like fictional things, these have been created and are now reality somehow. So this must be some kind of human mind, or in our own minds, that have created this. And they kind of feel that's a bit of a safety net, because the Doctor's like, if this is in the human mind, the Daleks can't land here. We're safe. That obviously falls apart very quickly when they realise that, the Daleks are here. They can't explain it. And then, as I said earlier, it goes on later on in the series, in the episodes, and then we have that little flashback to the gate where it says, haunted house, admission, whatever many, So, yeah, dude, this is a real quirky thing. It's really fun. It's really cool to see that old Hammer horror, typical haunted house sort of thing going on. It's just weird, isn't it, in the story?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's the episode that always, if someone says to me, "Oh, the chase," it's the episode that immediately springs to mind. It's the one that sort of stands out. But it's the episode I thought I didn't like, and yet watching it last night, I actually found myself really enjoying it because of how ridiculous it was. And I couldn't remember what the payoff was. I was like, I remember this is all their actors or something, and then I was like, when it gets to the end and it says it's the what is it, the House of Horrors or something, I thought, oh yeah, that's right, it is a real place, but it's like a toy, like a theme park sort of thing. And I thought, actually, I kind of like that, because it's, if you don't think too much into it, it is a ridiculous idea. Why would someone in a theme park be throwing Daleks around? Why would they? They're not really Frankenstein then. So that's or Frankenstein's monster. So if they're not the monster, how have they got the power to pick up a Dalek? You could read into it and write it off as being absolutely ludicrous, but it is fun, and it's so different to the other episodes that I think it sort of stands out as being one of the better episodes. Actually, I really enjoyed watching this last night. It was just a lot more fun than I remember, but also I love the creepy atmosphere at the start. It's it is bonkers, but I like it for it's good bonkers.
It's good bonkers. Yeah, you're right. That's exactly it, dude. It's a fun, quirky thing, because more so it just keeps the audience guessing, I think.
Well, yeah.
The audience are like, what am I watching right now? Have we drifted into some kind of fantasy thing? Is this a ruse? Is this some kind of, it's an immediate, like, I just don't know. Especially if somebody came in and they saw you watching this, they'd be like, what the bloody are you watching?
Yeah.
Your response would probably be at the same time, I don't know. I honestly don't know at the minute, but come back in half an hour, I might be able to tell you.
The payoff's right at the end as well, isn't it?
Weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a bit of a weird thing to watch and sit through. But, like we said, that's, that's kind of its thing. You have to throw a bit of charm in there and a bit, whatever, to make it its own unique thing. Because they could have just done, let's just have some, bespoke monsters that we've designed to run around and chase them. It wouldn't have been much of a talking point, so. It
is kind of weird the way they leave Vicky behind as well, isn't it? It's like, because I hadn't sort of clocked that to begin with. It's only when they're sort of chattering away and you see Vicky still in the castle, you're like, oh no, they've left poor Vicky behind. And I must admit, mate, it's been a while since I've watched this story, so I couldn't quite remember how she ends up getting back, if you like. But again, if you were watching this as a first-time viewer back in 65, you probably would be thinking, oh no, is that the end of Vicky? Like, is that her gone? There is a bit of jeopardy there in what is otherwise a really comedic sort of episode, isn't it?
Yeah, defo. That's what I mean. There are some parts of this story where you think, wow, this is quite funny, but then it's sort of juxtaposed with these kind of darker moments, because you can see the Doctor's really cut up about that when they leave Vicky behind. He's really beating himself up, and because none of them realise. It's really sad, really, in a way, because none of them realise until they've departed and stuff. But then that does provide a bit of spice to the story, because Vicky is trapped on the Dalek ship. She's been captured, but she witnesses what's going on. She witnesses the doppelganger robot being created and stuff, and she's able to give him a heads up and stuff. So yeah, it's that was a really interesting part. Who was the guy that played the Doctor's doppelganger?
Edmund Warwick, I think his name is.
Was it Edmund? Yeah, it was. Yeah. So that was a real, in terms of trying to accomplish that stuff with TV back then, you just had to rely on somebody looking a little bit like William Hartnell, I guess, right? Because this guy looked kind of like him, kind of.
Well, yeah.
But, but what they would typically do is, like, you'd have like a split screen sort of thing going on, and then when the actor's shot from behind and they're in conversation with the actual actor, that's, you don't see their face, you just see somebody in a wig and the same costume and stuff. But in this one, like, there was even a shot where the door opens and you see the robot. They haven't even used Hartnell for the close-up.
Yeah.
It's Edmund in there, and you think, hold on a minute, that's the dude that is supposed to look like Hartnell when we're at a distance almost. That's not the dude that's supposed to be in there now. That's meant to be. So that was a bit weird, right? So that was weird. So yeah, Edmund Warwick.
It's incredibly confusing, isn't it? I mean, from a distance, I think you can absolutely get away with it. He's got enough likeness to Hartnell to see him from a distance and think, oh, that could be him. Plus, it's a robot, so it's not quite 100% accurate. But then, because they keep mixing in close-ups of Hartnell playing the Hartnell robot to try and make it look like they've captured him perfectly, but then it switches to Edmund playing the Doctor, it does get really confusing, especially when they're trying to overlay pre-recorded dialogue that Hartnell's recorded and Edmund's trying to mouth lip sync it, and he does a very bad job of it, I have to say. There's not one bit where he manages to get it right, but it becomes very confusing, and I couldn't work out why there were times where Edmund was playing the actual Doctor, not the robot, and Hartnell was playing the robot, but then it would switch. And apparently it's because you know, back in the day, they filmed these things like a stage play, pretty much. So you'd have actors running from set to set to get in position, ready for the camera to come to them. And so it was sort of a technical thing of, well, if we have Edmund there playing the Doctor, then we can have Hartnell in this shot. And so it becomes very confusing that basically William Hartnell and Edmund Warwick are both simultaneously playing each other's parts in the same episode, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's weird.
Because you keep thinking, well, hang on, that's the robot Doctor, but it's not meant to be. It's meant to be the actual Doctor. So it all becomes a bit of a mind melt at one point. Do you know what I love though, mate? Is the fight, because I remember in the commentary for this, whoever's talking, it might be Richard Martin, the director, says Hartnell was a bit of a loose cannon, and when he had fight scenes, he really went for it. Like, if he hit your hand or accidentally caught your thumb, you know, that's just, you know, he's playing it for real. He said he was a bit dangerous in the studio when it came to fight scenes, and he loved them. So I can just imagine poor old Edmund thinking, "Get steady on, Bill. You nearly caught me a cropper there." And you know, I just love that stuff. You know, when they're having the fight. But yeah, it's confusing, the android thing, and there's something slightly creepy, isn't there, about his look? You know, that bit where he, like you said, there's a close up of him when he's supposed to be the Doctor, but it's the guy playing the android Doctor, and he's sort of supposed to say the dialogue, but it doesn't quite sync up.
It's weird.
And he looks a bit weird. I don't know. It's all a bit odd. Yeah, doesn't quite work.
You can see,
but it adds to the weirdness of the episode, really.
Oh yeah, for sure. You can see that they were trying to do something a little bit different, and you know, provide a little bit of spice to what was going on. But it just comes off as a little bit like, yeah. I think just because the illusion is shattered.
That must have been
just because of what you just said, basically. Yeah.
It must have been a sort of a technical nightmare, that studio day. I mean, they would have had to have planned every shot so carefully. Right, we're going to have Edmund in there. Bill will come in, but then Bill will be the Doctor for that scene. Then we're going to play in the pre-recorded dialogue that Bill's done over Edmund. I bet that was a nightmare studio day, you know. I mean, it just about works, just about. But, yeah, it's a bit odd.
It would have been a nightmare, whichever way you cut it. It would have been crazy. Yeah.
Old Richard Martin was probably pulling his hair out that day, I should imagine.
Yeah, oh, defo. Yeah, because there's a lot going on in this as well, you know. Because it's not just a case of, right, we've got a linear story which goes from A to B through 6 parts. You've essentially got like 4 small short stories, all very different. You know, so, yeah, it would have been a tough one, I think, for Richard Martin to get his head around and get this done. So, yeah. Okay, and then there's a smattering of other small supporting cast members. Well, we won't go into too much detail with that, but mainly played through the contraption that the Doctor had built, the time-space visualizer, where, you know, he can basically look at. It gets a little bit techie, science fiction-y there, where he basically, you know, I think him and Vicky explain it in a way that like everything that happens in the universe is recorded in light atoms somewhere. So we're able to use those. So the Doctor says, you know, pick a year, and then they slide this thing in and they can see almost like a little video playback of what happened at that point. So they go back and they see Abraham Lincoln and William Shakespeare and the Beatles and stuff. So, you know, all the supporting cast members around there, you know, I'm not going to go into those, but they were there. So let's talk about Vicky then, Maureen O'Brien. So Vicky's an interesting character for me because I think we've mentioned this on the previous stories of hers that she's been in that we've reviewed, that she's got this kind of fieriness to her, that she isn't just a companion that follows people around and screams. She does have a bit of a sassiness to her. Not a huge amount, but she does have a bit, and she's very knowledgeable and all this stuff. But at the same time, dude, I really struggle to remember like key moments that she's in some of the stories, because I think you picked up on it earlier. You know, there's a bit where she's walking through the jungle planet, Mechanus, you know, at the beginning where they're walking through and there's those big mushroom trees and everything. There's the bits there where like there's obviously an actor in a tree suit that's like bending down over her and look like she's being captured and stuff. She's not really into it too much, you know. And the bit at the top where they go up on the roof and she looks over and she passes out, it's like a very theatrical sort of thing, you know. I'm conflicted a little bit. I think she's a great character and she's a cool companion, but I just struggle to think back of some of the cool things that she's done after I've watched a story with her in it. But as far as Maureen O'Brien goes, she's a great actress, but yeah, I don't know. I'm always conflicted a little bit with her.
Yeah, I mean, I like Vicky as a character, but I agree they don't often know what to do with her. And I think Maureen O'Brien said this herself, that she got a bit bored. And I feel like she's a bit bored in this story, if I'm honest. And again, she doesn't get a lot to do, but like you said, that scene where she's captured and she's on the Dalek spaceship, I don't feel... There's nothing memorable from Vicky in this particularly, apart from maybe towards the end... You know, that scene, which we'll come on to, where she's comforting the Doctor and she's like, you know, when Ian and Barbara want to leave, she sort of says, you know, you've got to let them go. And she's almost sort of, you know, she sort of tells the Doctor a few home truths that he has to acknowledge. So that's probably the only standout scene for Vicky in this, I feel like. She gets a few little things to do, but yeah, I feel like Maureen looks a bit bored herself. I mean, Vicky's bored at the start of the episode, isn't she? She's like, you know, when... Barbara's making a dress and Ian's reading a book and she's just sort of wandering around like a bored teenager, and they're like, oh, go away, Vicky, go and find something to do. And yeah, so yeah, nothing stand out from her in this one, sadly, but I like the character. Yeah,
I do. I think the character's very cool, and yeah, just nothing. I don't know, she does do a few bits and she is in there, and she's, I don't know, it just feels like they never decide wholly, like, what do we actually want Vicky to do in this story? You know, do we give her her own little sort of side story? She does have that a bit, I guess, when she gets captured by the Daleks and then she links up with those lot, you know, a bit later on and stuff. But I don't know, man. I just feel like, yeah. Anyway, she was cool though. I'm not going to say she's a bad actress or the character's bad. It's just a bit forgettable, mate, overall.
Yeah, over the 6 parts, it gets a bit lost,
and probably the most poignant part, I guess, in the story, both as, you know, as narrative goes, as far as narrative goes, and also for the actors, would be the ending scene with Ian and Barbara. So throughout the story, those guys are absolutely on fire, like you would expect them to be, as we've seen in all of the other stories they've been in. Because you have Ian, that's very much he's kind of the muscle, right? Whenever anything needs to go down in terms of setting traps, getting into scraps with people, you know, doing the manual stuff, you know, Ian's your guy for that, which is really cool that they allowed him to do that, because at the end of the day, he's a high school teacher, you know, he's a secondary school teacher, and you wouldn't imagine him, just by the look of him, that he would be like the action hero of Hartnell's era in a way. But he's very much, and then Barbara's got the very understanding, down to earth, you know, concerned about the right things at the right time kind of thing. You know, she's very, very approachable and human in that respect, like the opposite to Hartnell in a lot of ways. So because of those two things, those two throughout the story were absolutely as you'd expect, and brilliant, so good. But the most poignant bit, mate, was... and something that choked me up massively that I didn't expect. I mean, when I first watched this story many moons ago, I don't remember getting this choked up, but when I rewatched it, I was like, I think I'm choking up pretty bad here. And not just because of those two leaving, but we'll come on to it in a second, more so Hartnell's reaction to it at the very end. But so what did you think to these two as their final story? And then that closing bit, which felt very... breaking of the fourth wall almost for a large portion of it, with the photo stills and stuff, and then their very last appearance with them two just cracking up laughing on the bus because they've been away for a couple of years, currency's moved on a little bit, the conductor's like, what are you talking about, you know, and they just find it funny, and it's a lovely little send-off, you know. So what do you reckon to those two?
I mean, I think you said the word consistent there. I love the characters of Ian and Barbara, and William Russell and Jacqueline Hill were so good together that it is a bit of an end of an era, isn't it? So it's maybe not the best story for them to go out of, but they're both still very, very consistently good throughout it. And I have to say, the end, sort of last 5 minutes of this story are, I think, perfection. Because you get Hartnell's reaction to them leaving, which pretty much mirrors how he felt. He didn't want them to leave. He was heartbroken that they were leaving the series. He couldn't understand why William and Jacqueline wanted to leave. So they say in the commentary, that the Doctor's reaction is almost exactly how Bill reacted when they told him. He was furious. He just couldn't get his head around it. He's like, we're in a great show, we're having fun. Why do you want to leave? So it makes it all the more poignant when you're watching Hartnell get so upset about them leaving. But it's brilliant because you've got that slight danger of they're going back in the Dalek ship. Are they actually going to be able to work it properly? Are they going to get back? Because you love these characters so much that you wouldn't want anything to happen to them, but they've decided they're going to take that risk. And then obviously they go back and you've got the lovely scene with all the photographs. You get the scene on the bus, which is brilliant. You get the classic line of London 1965, which became such a huge thing when Doctor Who was shown on Twitch. I think that all kicked off, didn't it? Mm-hmm. It became something that people just latched onto, So you get all of that. It's a gorgeous ending for them too. I think it's the perfect ending for those characters as well. And what I love about it is, and I'd sort of forgotten this because I don't watch The Chase very often, believe it or not. It's not a story, it's not a go-to for me. But that end was so beautiful, mate. And what I loved about it, and I'd forgotten, was I kept thinking, does the Doctor know that they got back there? I can't remember now. And of course, he's watching them on the time-space visualizer. And I thought, so he does. So he knows that they've got back safely. That's lovely. And obviously, so he's then, okay, we've done it, let's move on. And he says, I shall miss them. It's just beautiful stuff and heartfelt and just delivered perfectly. It's such a good ending. It's a shame. I know we'll come on to Hartnell, mate. It's a shame in all this beautiful stuff that you've got going on that he makes probably one of his best fluffs ever, where he says, you'll end up as burnt cinders in Spain. Space. Yeah. In Spain. Yeah, brilliant fluff. Oh, it's such. I bet he was kicking himself, but he was probably caught up in the anger. But it's such a beautiful ending, isn't it? It is perfect, I think. It's got everything in there. It's got the anger of the Doctor. It shows the softer side of the Doctor. It shows these two wonderful characters finally going home and laughing, and it's great stuff. It's worth going through the 6 episodes just for those last 5 minutes. It's beautiful. Yeah, it is. Yeah, absolutely, man. And it's in stark contrast, isn't it, to some of the companion endings that we get these days. These days it's normally reliant on like a very big story arc that's going to say goodbye to them. In this story, you didn't see it coming. You saw nothing at all about those two wanting to leave or go back home. It's not until the very end when they realise that the Dalek time machine is still there. And so Barbara clocks it. She's like, look, we can use this to get home. And that then plants the seed in Ian's head. And he's like, you can see in his face, he's an amazing actor as Ian. William Russell's face, he acts with his face in that bit because he's like, the penny's dropped. You're right. We can use this to get home. I'd never considered that. So that's when, the seed is planted, and then they have another little think about it, don't they? And then they come back to it, and he's like, should we do it? He's like, yeah, let's do it. And so that was kind of, I didn't get emotional really at that point. When we saw those guys happy and laughing and, having a look around London, they're just happy to be back. And that sort of cheeky playfulness that they've got now between them. So they blow up the Dalek time machine, don't they? And the alarms are going off and they're having a little giggle about it. And then they're off. But yeah, you're right, dude. It's Hartnell's reaction. And I thought that immediately. I think at that point in time, Hartnell is so transparent that you could tell, anybody could tell if they've watched a Doctor Who from the start up to this point, that was William Hartnell's reaction, not the Doctor. So that was Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it did choke me, dude. And it's choking me now. I'm thinking about it. It's such a such a lovely moment because he just, as we've seen in the what's that documentary that they did with David Bradley? What's it called? An Adventure in Space and Time. You could see, like, when you watch that and then you just read and see interviews with William Hartnell, he just absolutely loved the show and wasn't really into change. You know, he was happy with how he was playing the Doctor. He was happy with Ian and Barbara, you know, and he just didn't really, he hated the thought of those two leaving. So, I'm choking.
No, I'm not surprised by it, because it is an end of an era, isn't it? You know, we've had Susan has left now, so he's got sort of Ian and Barbara and Vicky obviously brought into sort of, in a way, to take over from Susan's role. But yeah, it is the fact that I think, you know, that that's the sort of, as much as that is the Doctor speaking, that is Hartnell speaking. I think it says on the production notes, they give him, I think the line was, you know, yes, I shall miss them. But they said, you know, take your time, Bill. If you want to say something, just say whatever comes to you, whatever. And he says, that's what he says, silly old fusspots. You know, that's Bill. The line is, I shall miss them. He's like, silly old fusspots. They, you know, it does say in the production, they just gave him a minute to do whatever he wanted to do on that scene. And that's what he came up with. So it is very much Bill Hartnell speaking as much as the Doctor in that scene. So it is very, very moving. And it's a mixture of emotions, because you've got that, you're so happy that Ian and Barbara are back safe and they're having so much fun, and it's such a beautiful scene. But then you've got the heartbreak of the Doctor at the other end of the time-space visualizer. So it's brilliant. It chokes me up as well, mate. I was really moved last night, and especially coming after 6 episodes of, like you said, a tonally, you know, the tone of the 6 episodes are so all over the place. To get this absolutely heartbreaking yet beautiful ending is quite, I wouldn't say jarring. Jarring, but in a good way. It's such a beautiful end. Yeah, you're right.
It does shift a little bit tonally, and that's what I mean. That it sort of comes out of nowhere. Like, if we think about Tegan, for example, she banged on all the time about wanting to get back to bloody Heathrow Airport, and she's had enough all the time, and she wants to get back. So by the time that she does, you know, that does all wrap up, you're like, okay, well, there's no surprise here. She's wanted to be back, you know, back at Heathrow Airport pretty much the entire time that she's been with the Doctor. Whereas with Ian and Barbara, although they were in harm's way in a lot of times, and they were rocked, you know, they were emotionally rocked by some things, and, you know, it wasn't all plain sailing. You didn't see this coming at all. And then back in the day, of course, unless you knew people who were working on the show and stuff, this would have been a real surprise, because, you know, there would be no Twitter account to spoil it. There would be no leak or anything. So, yeah, a real surprise departure for those two.
Yeah. And you know what I love about this era, mate, and I think which makes the ending even more sort of heart-wrenching, is that I think during the first sort of few series of Doctor Who, you get this real, and it's highlighted in this story, you get this sense that they are like a proper family. They live, you know, you get the sense of the lives they're living on board the TARDIS, don't you? The very first scene is the Doctor's tinkering with this machine. You've got Ian reading his book or comic. It's a book, isn't it? You've got Barbara sewing a dress for Vicky. You know, they are living aboard the TARDIS. It's not just like now where they sort of land, they come out the TARDIS straight into the adventure. We see them being almost like a family, in a sense, don't you? On board the TARDIS. You know, living like, and that's what I love about the early series. In that's not just this story. It's you feel that throughout Hartnell's era, you know, even with Susan and stuff like that. So that's one of the things I sort of miss, really, is that because television is so fast paced now, it's just TARDIS lands, bam, into the adventure. You know, back in the sort of 60s, you could have episodes where I think pretty much all of episode 1 is just them looking at the, you know, they're tinkering with that blimmin' machine, watching the Beatles, you know, it's like just living and eating and drinking and sleeping as well, you know, things that are so simple to our everyday lives that we never see. You know, we never see the Doctor sitting down and taking a nap like we do in this story. You know what I mean? There's a lot of eating. They're often, I need some food now. And it just makes it feel more realistic, you know, that Ian and Barbara are humans. They do need sleep. They do need food. It kind of has a more organic feel to it in early Doctor Who, which it's just the nature of TV now that we just don't sort of concentrate on stuff like that. You know, it's not important to the story, so we don't have it. But that's one of the things I like about it, mate, is just this sense of family and them living their lives in between all the adventures. You know what I mean? It makes you feel more for the characters, I think. Yeah,
defo. Absolutely, mate. Yeah, you do have this sense of, like you said, this family vibe to it all. And it really does make you, it makes you, what's the word? It makes you sort of form this emotional attachment to the characters in a subconscious way almost. Because you might watch an episode or two and you think, I wasn't really keen on that, or that didn't really resonate with me. But at the end of the day, you still have this emotional attachment for the characters and them being together and all that stuff. So yeah, it's a good ending for those two. A sad ending for Hartnell and for the Doctor equally, you know, because the character and the actor will miss those two. So let's finish up on Hartnell then. So one of the very few episodes or stories, dude, where he wasn't on holiday. We actually see William Hartnell in every episode, pretty much. And he's in a lot of... this would have been taxing for him because he was in this a lot. You know, he had quite a few lines in every episode and he was doing things. And surprisingly, mate, just rocking and rolling for the most part. We had a couple of little fluffs here and there that you would expect from him. Unfortunately, like you said, one of the biggest fluffs, which is the line at the end with Spain instead of space and all that stuff, which is just hilarious when you look back on it. But overall, dude, just playing that real crotchety, grumpy Doctor for a lot of it, but just every now and then, exactly when it's needed. And this is why Hartnell was so good. Every now and then, when the story required it, he injected just that cheeky smile. And the way he delivered a line was just funny. And that sort of smile he had on his face, just, you know, that sort of glint in his eye that was needed to sort of break up maybe some tension, or there was just sort of, you know, a little scene building thing where we weren't into the peak of the scene at that point, that we were building up to something. And Hartnell's just giving that little smile and stuff like that. So I thought he was really good in this, bud, and I thought I got a lot of respect for him to go through it, knowing that it would have been a fairly hard thing for him to do 6 parts with lots of lines and stuff. So yeah, he was good, I thought.
Yes, no, he is good in it, mate. I think he really steps up to the plate, and I love Hartnell's Doctor. He is alien, isn't he? You know, it's funny. It's like the softer side. It takes a lot for the softer side to break out, but when it does, it's so great because of that. It's like those, you know, you wait for those little moments of the softer side of the Doctor, you know. And what I love is he's not afraid to say when he's wrong. Like, he'll have a good old moan at Barbara about something, and then she'll pull him up on it, and he'll say, "Yes, my dear, sorry, you're right." And I think, you know, he's so unpredictable as well because of it. You never quite know what Hartnell's Doctor's going to do. But yeah, he's great in it, mate. There's the odd little fluff, but that's part of his character, I think. Now we've just become, you know, we just know that is part of the Doctor. You know, there's a great bit where he's in with the mechanoids. I think it's in episode 6, the very start, where there's this sort of awkward silence and they're all sort of looking at each other, and then I think Hartnell suddenly remembers it is his line. But if you watch it almost feels like I bet those 5 seconds felt like about an eternity while they were like looking at each other going, is he going to say it? Is he going to say his line? And he suddenly kicks in and then it's all right, we're back on track now, and everyone says their, you know, line. But yeah, he's great in it. It's really cool to see him with his crumpled white hat as well. It's funny how you notice these little things, you know, like a variant of the Doctor's costume. I mean, I know he changes his costume like every 2 minutes now in the new series, but it's fun, isn't it, when you see, the Doctor's wearing a crumpled old white hat for this story. That's fun. That's interesting. And the bit where he thinks Barbara's criticising his singing, and You know, it's humorous, and yet he's got this, I don't know, just totally alien quality that I love. I just adore Hartnell as the Doctor, and I think it's a good one for him. As I said, every scene he's in, he's pretty much, you can't take your eyes off him. Even the weird fight scene with his robot android, he absolutely goes for it. Mm-hmm. And yeah, heartbreaking. The ending is so beautifully performed by him. He basically, mate, just gets the character of the Doctor. He absolutely gets that he is. You almost feel like he believes he is that alien, cantankerous, and yet somehow lovable character. Yeah, Hartnell totally gets it.
Yeah, defo. I agree with that, mate. 100%. It's a lovely ending. Yeah. So, is there anything else on your notes, dude? Before we wrap this episode up and score
no,
it?
I don't think so.
No.
No, I've got Maya Beast written in great big letters, but that's about it.
Maya Beast. Oh, yeah, the big octopus thingy. Yeah. There was some cool stuff.
I haven't got anything else on my notes.
Just a couple of things for me, just quickly. I think, just going back to the mechanoids, I thought the voice work was really good on them because you couldn't understand fully what they were saying. But I think that was a good thing, though, because it showed that you don't need to humanize everything so much. You know, these are machines after all. And so they had this cool kind of... and you can tell that they wanted to differentiate what they were doing with that from the Daleks as well, because you already had the modulated electronic sort of sound for the Daleks. So this needed to be still machine and computerized, but not in the same way. So I thought they were cool, the voice work.
Yes, I liked the mechanoids, mate. Yeah, I agree about the voice.
And also, dude, Dudley Simpson back again. Oh, Dudders. It feels like every episode that we review these days is Dudley Simpson.
Yeah.
But the music for this one was a bit more ethereal, a bit more atmospheric, which I quite like when Dudley does that. And so nothing to write home about, but did the job fairly well in some of those atmospheric scenes as well.
Yeah, no, I thought Dudley's music was fairly, it fitted the different episode. I was going to say different stories, but different settings. It was kind of fun score from Dudders.
Oh, Dudders, yeah. All right, then, scores. It's you to go first, bud. What are you saying on this one?
Actually, I'm going to throw it over to you because I find this really difficult to score, mate. Because I do because I enjoyed it, but I don't know that it's good. If you know what I mean. I think the storyline is pretty thin, so I'm really struggling on this one. So I'm actually going to, for a change, you're going to throw it back to you to see what you score it because I can't decide.
Okay, so I'm going to go with a 6.5 for this one because exactly as you've just mentioned, the story is nothing crazy. It's very simple. It's enjoyable, but there are just certain without these really lovely moments and other cool little bits, it probably would have been a 5 for me. It was just very middle of the road, but the performances from William Russell and Jacqueline Hill, the performance from William Hartnell, and some of the cool little quirky bits around the Iridians and the mechanoids and stuff, that's bumped it up a little bit. So it's certainly not the best of Hartnell's era, not the best of Classic Who, but it's an enjoyable little watch. Yeah.
Yeah, that has helped me actually because I'd written 6.5, but then when we were talking about the ending, I was thinking, is it a 7? Because it's that ending really saves it for me. But I think you're right. I think overall, it's a little bit all over the place. So I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to give it a 6.5. It's not quite a 7. Well. It's so nearly there.
It is, isn't it? It's nearly there. And to be honest with you, that 0.5 on there for me is the ending with Ian and Barbara and the Doctor and stuff. So.
Yeah.
Okie dokie. A 6.5 then from each of us. Very cool. What did our awesome listeners think? We put it over to you guys as usual. And over on the Twitter we had at Titan Sci-Fi. Tom says, love all the mini adventures, saying goodbye to 2 legends and a great introduction to Steve. 8 out of 10. Sam Ash, says more so a tough watch recently with the departure of Ian. and the passing of William Russell. Both enjoy this story as a fun adventure and as an artifact of history with only one recording of the Beatles performing on Top of the Pops that exists. Fun story, 7 out of 10. Is it?
Can I just put in a little side note, mate, as well? This, and now you may have watched this, but this absolutely reduced me to tears. There's a little extra on the DVD, and it's a chat with William Russell and Simon Guerrier, I think that's how you say his name. And right at the end of the little 10, 15 minutes extra, William Russell reads an extract from Simon's book, which is just a little tiny follow-on of when Ian takes Barbara back home. Oh my goodness, it is. You just have to see it. It's only about a minute long. He just reads the last little chapter or whatever, and he's like, Barbara goes back to see her mum, and Ian stood waiting. And I'm not going to say, if you get a chance to watch it, just what it is. If you think the ending to the episode is beautiful, this is just a lovely little extra that's in a book somewhere that Simon wrote. I'm sorry, I don't know what the book was called, but watch that little extra, mate. That, because William Russell's reading it. It's just, it's beautiful. And that did reduce me to tears. You need to watch that.
Oh, I did, yeah.
Watch it on your own with some,
All right, cool. Yeah, I'll give that a watch. Okay, so that was, who was that? That was Sam Ash, with a 7. Chippy T says, you have to love the scope of ideas and settings in the episode. The Daleks are crazy, smashing through time and planets, determined to get the TARDIS for themselves. Great performances from companions, new and old. Sad for the departures, but nice to see newbies. 8.5 from me. Cool.
Wow, okay.
At Toku Beohuvian, this is Tom, says an underrated Hartnell story and the best Dalek story. The mechanoids aren't great, but hopping from one place to another, similar to the Keys of Marinus, is... a sad farewell to Babs and Ian, but a fun hello to Stephen. One I'd recommend if people just want a good time. A 9 out of 10. Yeah, wow, Edward Galuli, short and sweet, says, not a classic, but fun, 6.5. And Nick H says, I love the ambition of this one, but the Beeb was pushing it even for them. Episode 4 is the worst directed ep of old Who, but gives the whole thing 5 out of 10 somehow. Still loves it. And then just a few over on Facebook. Alex Bobbin says, The Chase was my first exposure to 1960s Doctor Who. I watched it a lot as a kid because it was released on VHS with Remembrance in a nice looking Dalek tin. I love the Chase through time concept, although it's mostly silly padding until Mechanus. Episode 4 with the monsters is especially wacky, but the beefy mechanoids with their funny voices are a design classic. I rate this one 7 out of 10. Nice.
Cool. I remember that tin.
I don't recall that. That sounds cool though. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that Dalek.
Right. Darren Sykes. After battling the Daleks on Skaro, then Earth, this was an interesting concept. Some parts on Iridius and Mechanus work well. The whimsical setting of the future haunted house is fun, but feels like it's padding. Meanwhile, the scenes set on the Empire State Building and the later ones involving the duplicate Doctor are just poor. The changes of location keep the story moving, and for viewers at the time, it would have been intriguing to see where the travellers turn up each week. The story does, however, have a satisfactory resolution and provides the perfect opportunity to return Ian and Barbara to 60s London. A 7 out of 10. Indeedy. And lastly, Charlie Turner says, a silly and ridiculous but fun story. I mean, the Daleks facing off against the Prince of Darkness himself, Count Dracula, and Frankenstein's monster. Who would have heard such a thing? Keyword being Who. Anyway, it has a lot of ideas that keep the 6-part format going, as well as the Daleks building a so-called robot duplicate of the Doctor for the dumbest of reasons, and not everything in it adds up. Also, in quotes, London 1965. That is all. 8 out of 10. Not bad for this one. It's hilarious more than anything, really. So, okay, so I think the average score on this one, dude, is a 7.5 rather than a 6.5 from you lots. So there we go. That was The Chase and a 6.5 from us. And thank you very much to you lot for your mini reviews and your scores out of 10. Always welcome and appreciate it. So thank you very much. Next week, bud, we're sticking with animated stuff. So what we got?
Yeah, so next week we're going to do the second Doctor story, The Abominable, I can never say it, Snowman. So I think half of this is animated, half of it isn't. So you can watch it whichever way you like. We're going to be reviewing it as we're going to be watching it all. So we're going to be reviewing it as a story overall. So if you want to watch it all animated, you can, or you can watch it 3 animated, 3 live action. It's up to you. But next week, The Abominable Snowman.
The Abominable Snowman. Nice. So on that note then, dude, I think we will wrap it there for episode... what episode are we on? Right, episode 406.
406. Yay.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Big Blue Box. That was 406 and our review of the first Doctor story, The Chase. So thank you very much for those of you that sent in your scores and stuff. We'll be doing the same next week for The Abominable Snowmen. So get that watched either on Blu-ray, DVD, or I think it's on iPlayer, this one. So get that watched, as we'll be asking for your thoughts and review next week. In the meantime, make sure you are following or subscribing to the podcast in your preferred podcast app, wherever you listen, so that you don't miss an episode when it lands every Friday. And you can also listen online over at bigblueboxpodcast.co.uk. You can check out all the episodes there, plus all the articles and reviews from the writers there. We're on the socials too, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff. There are links on the website, or do a search for us. We chat Doctor Who throughout the week, so get involved there. And we have a very cool free Discord server, so there's a link on the website. Hop in there and chat Doctor Who with loads of other very cool Doctor Who fans. Also, don't forget to remember to check out my co-host channel. It's on YouTube and it's called The Geek's Handbag.
The Geek's Handbag, yeah, I'm on YouTube. I'm also on all the socials. Go find me over there, The Geek's Handbag.
Yes, he's on the socials under the same name, and like the Twitter account, for example, for the Blue Box, Adam also chats lots of geeky stuff and Doctor Who all the time, so some good conversation happening over there. Until next time, my name's Gary.
My name's Adam.
And remember...